How's it going, New World? Sethphir here, and today we are going to take a look at the Void Gauntlet first impressions on the public test realm. It just came up a little bit ago, and I dove right in and I started getting to work looking at all the possible builds, dueling people for hours, and it's been a blast. And I've learned a lot of stuff, and I think I have a good grasp of what the Void Gauntlet is as a weapon, and I wanted to kind of share my first thoughts and impressions with you, so just grain of salt, my opinion will probably change over time as I see other combinations and other scaling with statistics, but for now it is going to be what I think of it. So diving right in, first I took off all my armor so that we could go ahead and take a look at what the Void Gauntlet is scaling with most. And so if I were to put 10 points into intellect here, you can see that my damage is going up by 20 on the right side here from 417 to 437. And if I were to take away those points and put in 10 into focus, I would be going up by 15 from 417 to 432. So it is going to be better for me to put points into intellect for damage. However, the Void Gauntlet scales off of both statistics for damage and solely scales off of focus for a lot of its healing elements. So you're probably going to want some weird combination of both. And I've been kind of racking my brain trying to see, man, what should I go with this weapon? Because it's a part melee weapon, part ranged weapon that runs off of intellect, basically. And it's weird. It makes no sense because you don't have any grit. You don't have any like grit moves. So it kind of is like opposite of what a lot of melee weapons do, in the sense that they have some sort of grit or some way to stop them from being interrupted. But it has a lot of cool benefits on the side note for that. So let's go ahead and dive into the weapon itself and just kind of see what the skills are doing, and I'll give you my impression and thoughts of all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look over here, and I just placed all of these skills, basically all the talent points, in the actual skills themselves, just so that we can play around with them, and I will show you each one of them and what it does. So we'll go ahead and start from left to right, starting with the Annihilation tree. So we'll look at baseline skills. So this is going to be Petrifying Scream. It's a 15-second cooldown. It does a little bit of damage, and it staggers people, which means that it will interrupt them as long as they do not have grit, and it will also put a root on them if they're within 5 yards in front of you. So it's kind of like a very close range disable, right? So you're going to disable their movement for 2 seconds as well, and that root will last. If they're at 50% health, then the root will last an additional 1 second for the additional talent down below. And then the final one, for every enemy that you hit with that, you will get Fortify for 10% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So it is a very nice ability, and it's probably going to be the core of the Void Gauntlet, as roots are very slim in this game. Ice Shower is probably the most reliable root within the game. The only other root would probably come from like Backstab on a Leaping Hatchet Strike, or whatever that move's called, where if you hit them in the back, it will root them. So it is hard to kind of get these things off, but root will stop enemies from dodging, stop them from lunging, and basically a lot of things. So it's kind of better than like a stun in most cases. So this is going to be a nice core ability to rely on. Then we have this weird skill, which is where it gets odd, and this is how the Void Gauntlet is a very strange weapon to me. But anyways, it's Void Blade, so basically you get this little Halo plasma sword looking thing, right? And what it does is it transforms your gauntlet. Instead of doing the normal like ranged auto attacks that it does, like this, and then a heavy, which is a slightly bigger hitbox version of that, you will now get a sword instead. So you're going to get a sword, and you're going to start to chop, and it's got a 3-hit combo. And then it also has a very strong lunge that makes you go very far. As you can see, I'm gaining a lot of distance. So that's actually really good on it. So let's go ahead and take a look back here, and we will go into the weapon itself. So it's going to do 100% damage with its hits and 150% with the fully charged thrust attack. And every time you hit anybody, you're going to put a 5% damage dot every 1 second on them, and reduce their damage absorption, which means you're going to lower their overall armor. And that's going to stack up to 3 times with a 15-second duration. So it will basically be on for quite a while. This makes it a very good ability because it shreds their armor, deals dot damage, and has heavy damage for the actual attack itself. So some of the bonuses in the talents down below will give you Fortify when you start up the ability for 5 seconds at 20%, which is quite generous. The next one is going to be 10% critical damage on any hit that the Void Blade hits with. And then the final one will have your thrust attacks or your heavy charge healing you for 5% of damage for each stack of the dot on them. So you could have 3 stacks total possible. And then this is going to be a line that you're going to see a lot with these Void Gauntlet abilities. It says scales exclusively with focus. And what that means is that that scaling on that heal will increase the more focus that you have. So if you don't have any focus, it's going to be very weak. But if you have some, then it will scale up pretty high. And the heal is quite generous. I've healed all the way up to full health. I've been stuck at full health while using this ability, but it has a little bit of nuances, which we'll get into later. So now we'll take a look at the third ability in the Annihilation tree, which is Oblivion. Oblivion summons a circular void rift around your feet. And so we'll go ahead and show you the first skill. This is the little scream. So you can see it's just damage people in front of you. And this would be Oblivion. And this range is quite generous. It also empowers you while you're inside of it. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the details here, as it is going to give you a 20% empowerment and also deal 30% of your weapon damage per second to all enemies who are within that zone for 6 seconds. So that's quite a bit. That's about 180% weapon damage, which is pretty high for a weapon skill. Usually they're around that marker. The powered up version of it is going to make your attacks within the zone weaken targets, reducing their damage by 5% per hit, and it lasts for 5 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So essentially 15% lower damage if you hit them multiple times. And then the last talent is going to give everyone within the zone 15 stamina per second, and that's going to include yourself and friendly allies while inside the radius, right? So this is going to be a pretty strong skill in my opinion. It's great to have on the point in a war. It's good to have if you're fighting any sort of melee person, but where it starts to get useless is if there's a ranged enemy, they'll just choose to not set in it, right? And that makes it a little bit odd. So we'll kind of go over that, and then we'll keep taking a look here. We'll go into the other base abilities, and then we'll start touching on the passives and the final talents. So let's go ahead and skip over to the Decay tree, and we'll go ahead and line up all of our abilities here in the order that they are in, and we'll show you what each of those does. So the first one is going to be the Baleful Tether, and that is going to be this right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit that, or I'm going to miss that completely. So we'll wait 20 seconds when that comes back. But if you were to hit it and you weren't terrible at the video game like me, it would make a tether onto them. So we'll go ahead and read what it does, and when that cooldown comes back up, we'll hit the next wolf. So we're going to fire a projectile to tether onto an enemy. It's going to weaken it and empower yourself by 4% per second, scaling up to 20%, and the tether is going to break if you get 15 meters away from somebody. It has a 10-second duration. So it will get pretty good, as it will make them do less damage and make you do more damage. It just unfortunately does no damage, so that makes it a little bit odd. So here we see the tether when I manage to actually hit it, and it's just going to drain this guy and make my damage go up as well. So we'll just go ahead and get rid of him and clear him out of the field. But it's a simple attach ability with a tether. So the talents to improve that actually do a little bit. Every time you hit somebody that has the tether on them, you're going to lower all your Void Gauntlet cooldowns by 5%. And the next one is going to give you 100% increased mana regeneration while the tether is active, which Void Gauntlet abilities do tend to use quite a lot of mana, so this isn't that bad. The next one is Soul Eater, which seems a bit odd, but you're going to get 80% of your weapon damage back as health if the tethered target dies, and it scales with focus. So I don't know, these getting stuff back when something dies is not very reliable, to be fair. Anyways, we'll go over to the next ability, which is going to be Orb of Decay. It's going to fire an unblockable orb that passes through enemies. It deals 100% weapon damage and inflicts the same dot that the Void Blade would inflict. It does 5% weapon damage per second and reduces their armor by 5% for 8 seconds, and it stacks up 3 times. And at max range, it's going to transform into a healing orb and return to you, healing friendlies for 20% weapon damage per second for 5 seconds, and that healing scales with focus. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. As we can see, this little orb shoots out, then comes back green, and it's going to heal that, and it does heal you, as you can see on my debuffs here, on my buff bar. I am getting healed by my own orb coming back. So it's just a simple skill shot, and then it has some pretty cool additions, actually. They're going to get 5% mana per enemy hit by the orb, which is, okay, it's decent, it's a little bonus, but this one's nice. You're going to slow enemies that have any debuff on them, any at all. You're going to reduce their movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds, which actually could be pretty good. So I do like this slowing orb talent here. It is not too bad. The ability feels a bit odd itself, and we'll get to that when we talk about this detonating orb. And it says you press the ability again to detonate the orb for a 4-meter wide explosion radius. And depending on the phase of the orb, it's going to either deal 100% weapon damage and apply a stack of Disintegrate, or heal friendlies for 70% weapon damage. And this again is going to scale exclusively with focus. So that's going to look like this. If I detonate it at the end, you can see I exploded it. That was a green one because it was on its way back in a moment, and the purple detonation would just do damage. And the only problem I have with this is when I destroy or detonate this orb, it doesn't come back to me. So here I explode it for purple damage, it's gone. And it's not coming back, it's not doing the healing, and it seems to only hit somebody once. So like when it passes through them, you could try to barely time it to hit them a second time, but I don't know how reliable that is, and it feels worse than Mighty Spike, like Ice Spike, and I didn't even know that could be possible. But apparently that's what it is. So this last talent feels very useless to me, and almost is a trap because it's not gonna like come back. It's just really odd. It's very odd to deal with. So we'll go into the final talent, which is going to be Essence Rupture, and this is going to be a projectile that inflicts the rupture on somebody for 10 seconds, and anybody who hits that target is going to heal for 20% of the damage done. And it does not apply to dots. So this is, in my opinion, this is a insanely good player versus environment move. But in terms of PvP, probably not so much. And that might be the story of this weapon, to be honest. It seems like it can be useful for utility in PvE, but in terms of PvP, its potential is kind of limited and very like pigeonholed. But we'll go on to read the other abilities. So it's just going to give a player stamina when you hit the afflicted target. So you're going to constantly be refreshing stamina when you hit somebody that has this tether on them. And when this one is actually not too bad, friendly targets within 4 meter of the afflicted target are healed for 80% of your weapon damage when the Essence Rupture ends. So they don't have to die, it just has to time out or break, and that's going to scale with focus as well. So we'll go ahead and hit this wolf since he decided to hit us first. And there is the little ability on him. He's marked with that like lightning symbol, whatever that is. And if I hit him, I should heal for 20% of the damage back. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And one thing that we should look at is just the base scaling of the weapon. So there's 3 functionalities, so we'll get into that before we dive into passives. You're going to light attack for 100% damage, and then heavy attack for 125% damage. And that is also going to have 20% life leech attached to it. So less damage, but life leech for the trade-off, which is interesting. And then the final thing is you can't block, but you can only convert health into mana. So you can, like, I don't know, attack yourself, whatever this is, and it converts health into mana. So if I were to spend out all my mana for this, I could recuperate it back, which is interesting. So it kind of pairs with the lifestaff, I suppose, like in this weird scenario where you would want to refill your mana and then also like heal yourself back up to full while you could regenerate your mana back. It's kind of got some awkward stuff going on. It's got a lot going on, that's for sure. So that's going to be those abilities. Let's go ahead and go back into the weapon mastery for it and take a look at a lot of the passives and the final talent abilities on each side of the tree so you can get an idea of the play style of each of these Annihilation and Decay trees. So we'll start with the final abilities so we can get a good overall image of what it wants us to do. So the first one on the Annihilation tree is going to be Void Collar, and it's going to basically every time you hit something with an ability, any ability, you are going to gain a stack of Void Essence. And at 6 stacks, you're going to consume all of those and gain a 3-meter aura that heals you for 30% of your weapon damage every second and deals 30% of weapon damage to all enemies within that aura. The healing scales again exclusively with focus. It lasts 5 seconds and it has a 20-second cooldown. So it's not too bad, but not too good at the same time. It can get really nice in terms of life leech and damage dealt, so it kind of goes hand in hand with a melee playstyle. And as you can see, a lot of these abilities on the left side tree, Annihilation, are geared to be melee. I will add that every hit with the Void Blade while it's out counts as a stack towards Void Collar. So it counts as an ability hit. So if you hit 6 auto attacks, you will trigger Void Collar's ability, and you will start leeching life and dealing damage to people around you. So that could be a very powerful ability, and is not something that's too strong because it does have that internal cooldown, but it can add quite a lot of damage and healing on top of everything. And then we'll take a look at the Decay tree, and we'll look at Glimpse of the Void. And this is going to allow you to gain a stack of Void Essence per successful ability hit. And since you may or may not have the Void Gauntlet with this, it's going to be a little tricky because you might be more of a range build. But at 4 stacks, your next successful heavy ranged attack, which means you would have to switch off the Void Gauntlet, Vorpal Blade if you were to have that active, which you can do by pressing the ability again and just cancels it. Your next heavy ranged attack will instantly reset all Void Gauntlet cooldowns and remove all stacks, and it has a 15-second cooldown. So I tried to play around with this, but the cooldowns for the Void Gauntlet ranged moves seem to have kind of low cooldowns except for the tethers, but the tethers also do no damage, so it's kind of just a purely ranged debuff weapon. Like, it's not meant to do ranged DPS in my opinion, and from what all the talents say it's supposed to do. It's just supposed to be like providing assistance and buffs, which is what the developers said it was going to do, so that kind of makes sense and goes in line with a lot of what they have going on. So now we'll quickly skim through a lot of the passives, and then I'll go ahead and give you my final verdict and feedback of the weapon. So on the Annihilation side, there are quite a few good passives. This one will give you 10% damage when you are below 50% mana, which happens quite a lot. This one will give you 10% crit chance when you are above 50% health, which is also going to happen quite a lot because this is a probable weapon that you pair with the lifestaff. Another one granting cooldown reduction on all abilities when you critically hit. And in the same tier, there's a next one doing 10% crit chance while all abilities are in cooldown. So if everything is used up, you will gain more crit. This one is one of my personal favorites. You will get 10% empowerment or damage boost for 5 seconds, stacking up to 3 times whenever you cast any ability within 5 meters of an enemy. So that can get quite powerful up there, especially in groups. The next one is going to have your Harvest Essence, which is this, holding left click drain thing. It's going to be draining you less health from you. The health drain is reduced by 50% while you are below 25% mana. So the lower mana you are, the more health you're going to get. Kind of a mediocre talent if you ask me, but hey. The next one is going to be Leeching Agony, which is on critical hit. You're going to gain health equal to 15% of the damage done. Quite a nice talent. And then we have Refreshing Frailty, which is going to give you 5% cooldown reduction on all abilities when successfully hitting enemies who have 3 or more debuffs on them, which can be a bit difficult to accomplish. But if there was a item or a weapon that was going to put a lot of debuffs on someone, it would be the Void Gauntlet. And there are quite a few, so hopefully it can achieve that stack rate and get that cooldown reduction. So as you can see on this left side tree, it seems to be centered around critical hit and leeching life based off of critical hits, as well as ramping up a little bit of damage and getting back a lot of cooldown when certain things are happening, right? So left side tree, melee, damage dealing, crit, cooldown. Now we'll take a look at the right side tree. The next one is Deadly Range. It's going to give you 10% more damage on all heavy ranged attacks against targets more than 8 meters away. So remember, that's not light, only heavy. The next passive is going to give you 5% mana per successful ranged light attack against targets afflicted by your Void Gauntlet debuffs. So if you're really starving for mana, you can possibly take this talent and infinitely refresh. And the Void Gauntlet's abilities do cost mana. It's about 2 for each light attack for a range, and then I think a heavy attack is 5 or so, which is standard for all magic weapons. The next talent is going to be Radiant Efficiency, so mana costs are reduced by 25% while above 50% mana, which can save you quite a bit. The next one is going to be cooldowns reduced by 10% per second while performing the Harvest Essence. Now this one is kind of cool because if you can sustain yourself with the healing, you could essentially fully refresh all your cooldowns whenever you want. The only catch is you have to do this and you're draining your life. So if you're standing in your own Sacred Ground and Beacon or whatever that may be, this may not be that bad because you're kind of healing it up anyways. And then you would get all your cooldowns back for your Void Gauntlet and then be able to fire off whatever it is your abilities that you could do. So that could be quite spammy if done correctly. Now we'll go ahead and take a look at the other abilities within there. So this is going to be Leeching Bolts. Healing from the ranged heavy attack is increased by 30% of the damage dealt when the target is below 50% health, which means that you would get up to 50% leech on targets below 50% health, since you gain 20% leech anyways just for the Void Gauntlet's heavy attack base kit. The next one is going to be Extended Suffering, which successful ranged heavy attacks increase the duration of non-crowd control debuffs you have applied by 10%. So that's not going to count for slows or roots, but it will count for things like this, aura on them that's going to cause your allies to heal from damage, and it will also count for things like Weaken and Empower. So that's going to I'm not too sure on this one. This one seems a little odd. It honestly seems like a waste of a talent point, but it is there. It's there if you want it. And the last one's going to be Mending Evasion. Dodging while full mana heals you for 80% of the weapon damage, and it scales exclusively with focus on a 20-second internal cooldown. So as you can see, the right side tree, a lot of these moves focus on light and ranged heavy attacks. So you basically need to kind of whittle them down from range or get back cooldowns or reduce mana cost. So it seems to be the sort of caster healing support side of things. So that's pretty much what it comes down to. Left side is melee and right side is caster support. The right side does not do a lot of ranged damage, I can tell you that, because 2 of the skills are missing damage values. They don't do anything at all. They just support entirely. The only one that does do damage is this, and it does exactly the same damage as a light attack. So this is not a nuke 'em down ranged DPS weapon. You can get quite a bit of damage on the left side Annihilation tree, and it was the side I was playing with personally. The Void Blade thrust, like charge attack, feels really good because it has a lot of mobility. It lets you get really far. My only worry is that you don't have grit and you may be a bit squishy trying to get a little bit of intellect and focus and constitution, that you're kind of just spreading yourself out so thin that someone will just kill you anyways because you have like 6,000 or 7,000 health, right? So it's going to be really hard to be effective doing a lot of these builds. But if there was a path forward, I would say that it would be a support weapon for the lifestaff that would allow you to engage somebody in melee combat and kind of hold your own. That could definitely be good. Or in PvE, it can be a very powerful supporting weapon to lower the monster's damage that is dealing to your group and to add extra healing for everybody so that you don't have to do anything. But honestly, this weapon probably is the best in PvE. My PvP opinion of it probably needs more testing. I'll keep doing more duels. But if you can do something in player versus environment like Oblivion to increase your allies' damage and lower the monster's damage by hitting them within that Oblivion, that's a weaken right there up to 15%, plus the 20% weaken from the tether. That's 35% less damage that the boss monster is going to be dealing to your team, along with everybody who hits that monster is going to heal 20% of the damage that they deal to themselves, and that's very powerful as well. So this could be an ultimate support item to take down really difficult bosses in the future, and I'm definitely looking forward to see what it has to do with that. It has a lot of utility, and it has some good damage. This root is particularly very nasty in PvP, so I would like to see that used for a lot of things. Maybe you could even Petrifying Scream into an ice shower on top of that, and they're rooted even longer. They're just perma-rooted. Maybe it's the ultimate counter to melee weapons. I'm not super sure, but it definitely has some interesting go-tos. My personal favorite is Void Collar for sure, as you can deal quite a bit of damage if you get that ramp stack going with that Void Blade lunge, and so that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm building a little bit of hybrid in the statistics to hit some of the light attack damage bonuses in the intelligence tree, which Void Gauntlet is a magic attack, so it should scale off of that. It does do void damage. And then also getting things like dodge, getting mana back because the weapon is a bit mana starved itself. Focus is very nice to have all the way up to this 20% healing output at 150. So I would recommend a split between intelligence and focus if you want to mainly kind of hone in on the Void Gauntlet and use it as a damage weapon with the rest of your points in Constitution, however much you can get up to. But if you want to use it as a support weapon mostly, then I think pure focus and just using it with a lifestaff as a healer and then dumping the rest into Constitution is probably going to be the way to go. I don't know if you're going to be able to force this into a raw DPS weapon. It definitely seems to be geared towards a supporting healing weapon for sure. So that's going to be my first impressions look. I hope you guys had fun and learned a little bit about this weapon from it. I hope that it was content that was helpful for you, and if it was, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell down below, as we'll be doing weapon reviews and a lot of content like this in the future. We also have a join button for members that wish to subscribe to the channel, and a Discord in the description link down below that you can check out as well. Thank you for your time and watching the video, and we will catch you in the next one.